Good day to you as we begin our second day of comparative media. I spent a lot of time in England over the years. I told you that my parents are British, and sometimes I would be sitting there on their couch in the evenings watching television, and I would almost forget that I was in England because of the shows that I was watching. It could be an NFL football game. It could be an edition of CSI, Miami, LA, Chicago. It could be Big Bang Theory. It could be a Dave Chappelle comedy routine. It could be a lot of different things. There's so much American television on Britain, which is not to say that Britain doesn't create its own television. It does, and creates some really high quality television. But there's so much of American television in Britain that if you were watching it, you're enveloped in American culture, and it's easy to forget you're 3,000 miles away from America. And so this sets up what we're talking about today, because we're taking on the first chapter, so to speak, from my original book that I've now put online for you, a chapter on globalization. It's talking about the circulation, not just of media around the world, but really goods and services. And so that's our entry point for today's discussion. But before we get to that, let's take on our first two assignments today so that we have some clarity on that. And I just want to remind you that I did send out an email yesterday letting you know that the dates that you see on the D2L webpage are not completely updated yet from the last time that I taught the course. So please don't be confused. The cycle is every Tuesday and Thursday. I will release assignments by 1 p.m. and they will be due by 1 p.m. the following day. There will be no late assignments accepted. You have to plan your day accordingly and make sure that you're in on time. It's just not fair to the other students to say, oh, I couldn't get access to the internet, whereas somebody else has driven all the way to a Starbucks because their internet went out and they got their stuff in. And please don't send me anything on email. You may not realize it. I'm not meaning to say that you've done anything really, really wrong, but if you send me an attachment in email, it's like throwing a marble into a waterfall and then asking me to go get it a couple days later. That's what my email is like with the volume that I get. All right, so having said that, let's take on the first assignment, which is the RSC post. I'm going to open up the page here so I can remind myself about that. The RSC post. Remember, RSC stands for rounding some corners. It's the collection of newspaper columns. They're not really newspaper columns, but they're columns that you will shortly discover point out the oddball ironies of life. And many of these columns I wrote about media because that's my expertise. So part of this course, which is comparing media, is to compare media not just externally, which is to say between the United States and Canada or whatever country, but to compare media forms internally. Internal comparisons. That's what we're doing here. And the value of a comparison is it helps you see how you are different from the other. It gives you a reference point. That's why comparison is such a beautiful way of obtaining knowledge. And so for your RSC posts, here's how it goes. I want you to listen very carefully to this, and you can also consult the discussions link under the communication tab where the guidelines for the RSC posts are to be there. Now, I say that you have one RSC post today, but it's really a post that is going to consist of a comparison of the media in two columns that I discuss. Now, please don't get mistaken that you are to be comparing the subjects of the column. A column may be, for example, about how people are vain. I have a column that's called Vanity. I can't remember the exact title of it, but it has to do with the vanity that people seek through sun tanning and through all kinds of other means. Don't address that in your RSC post. Address the media that are described. So for example, in that column, I talk about a radio receiver that's used while you lie on the beach and turn this big piece of meat over while you're cooking it. The meat is your body, but you can check that out if you read the column. So what you should be doing when you select your two RSC columns, which you can select any columns that you want. You can go from the front of the book to the back. You can go the back to the front. You can pick out random ones. You can also look at the index at the end of the book. And at the index at the end of the book, it lists the categories of columns. So you have columns on holidays, for example. You can also look at the front of the book where we have a table of contents and just choose your column according to the name of the column in the table of contents. Try and choose your columns that are about media because that's what you're comparing here. This is a course on comparative media. Sometimes you may have to imply or infer. I should say infer is to get from, to imply is to direct to somebody else, to infer from the column how media are being talked about. Now, what are you doing in your comparisons in your RSC columns? Well, first of all, you're keeping to the word count. So many students lose points in this class by not keeping to the word count. The word count is 190 to 210 words. Exactly. No less, no more. That's how I can obtain a standard that I can judge all students by, and it's the same standard. If you send me a post that's 300 words long, you're giving yourself an extra advantage to get more ideas in. So the 190 to 210 word limit is designed to force you to be concise in your thinking. You may think, oh, that's not many words, it's going to be easier. It's not. Similarly, if you are typing on your phone, I hope you're paying attention to autocorrect and capitalization. You're going to lose a lot of points if you're starting out your sentences with a small I, for example, and have words that have been autocorrected and your sentences are not making sense, especially in a graduate level class. They must be meticulously edited, these posts that you're putting on for your RSC post. So here specifically is what you're comparing. You're doing 3 things in every single RSC post, which is comparing 2 columns. So the first thing that you are doing is you are comparing how the media discussed in the 2 columns or implied in the 2 columns, how the media differ in their look and their feel, which is also known as form. The form of something is the look and the feel. For example, we can say if you listen to Top 40 radio, the look and the feel is a very fast-paced messaging system, and it feels almost rushed. It feels condensed because of the amount of information that the disc jockey's trying to get in with advertisements and weather and local announcements, and of course the songs. So there is a look and a feel to it. Not so much a look in this case. I mean, it does have a look when you look on your radio dial and you see that scanner going across and it's skipping across stations, and it's got kind of a rush look to that too, but I'm focusing a little bit more on the feel. This is the form of radio as it might be discussed in terms of Top 40 radio. So the first thing you're doing is you're comparing the form, which is breaking down as the look and the feel between 2 media forms, between 2 media that are discussed in the columns. And you should actually be using those words: the form, the look, the feel. Use those words so that I can find your analysis. If you're not using those words, I don't know if you're talking about the look and the feel or the form. That's how form is defined, look and feel. So that's the first dimension in your 190 to 210 words. The second dimension is how the media differ in content. That is the information that is distributed by the media. If you look at Top 40 radio, you're not going to find interviews with book authors on there. You're not going to find film reviews on Top 40 radio. That's not content that you will find. What you will find is information about celebrities. You find information about bands. You'll hear contests. That's the content. So focus on the content. Once again, use that word, content and information. You can see on the guidelines on D2L, that's how I'm defining content. It's by information. And now finally, and the part that many students, at least in the early part of this course, which is where I'm really trumping it up here, oops, didn't mean to say Trump, which is where I'm really ramping it up here, is you must integrate the reading into the comparisons that you're making. The readings are meant to inform your comparisons. Today's reading is the reading that you draw on for today's RSC post. Today's reading is on globalization. So this is an online course, right? This is an online course where I don't get to sit in a classroom with you. This is my only chance to know that you have both comprehended and have been able to analyze and extend your understanding of the readings. So I have to know by what you're writing in the RSC posts that you are understanding the readings for today. And that means that you've got to pull those readings either using quotes or paraphrases. And you don't have to cite me because I know that it's me that's for these readings. These are readings from my book. All of these readings that are at least for the next few Thursdays in a row are coming from my book on the Thursdays when you're doing your RSC post. But you must demonstrate, you must bring the language of the chapter to support your analysis. Now, after each RSC post, I'm going to be circulating examples to the class by email. So if you're off to a little bit of a slow start, not quite certain whether you're getting the assignment correctly, you're going to be able to see samples. And again, many students could benefit more by really studying the sample media posts that I send, the sample posts that I send around, samples of excellent samples. So you'll see that coming tomorrow after I've had a chance to grade those. Similarly, after each post that I grade online, I'm going to go online, I'm going to enter feedback. I've had many students over the years, not so much grad students, I'm giving feedback after feedback each week on their assignments, and it's clear the students are not reading the feedback. They're making the same mistakes. They're turning in posts that are 300 words long, and each time I'm saying, you must meet the word count. losing points, and they keep turning into, that's the sign of a student who's not reading feedback. I don't expect that in a graduate level class, but I just want to try and avoid it in case it's a possibility. All right, so that's your first assignment today, is the RSC post. Now we're going into the second assignment. The second assignment for today is what is known as a country media post. Now, all of you have signed up for countries. Now, I'm really, really excited about the countries that you've signed up for. This class, I can tell, is already challenging itself. For example, somebody has selected Cuba. Yeah, you know who you are. Now, I'm going to take into account when I read this particular assignment that some of you may not have open access to research that others would have based on the country, and Cuba might be one of them. I have to take that into account. It's a communist country. Believe me, I'm not automatically dismissing, downplaying, or passing a value judgment on communism. I'm not trying to say that at all. But I am saying that it makes it harder to get to some of the research information. And that's what you're doing in this assignment, the country media post. You're going to be studying your country all semester long. So for this very first country media post, you're going to be discussing how the information that you are unlocking with regard to your country, you're going to be conducting research, you're going to be exploring the research that has to do with globalization of media in your particular country. If your country's Cuba, if your country's Afghanistan, if your country's Costa Rica, you're studying how globalization is taking place. Now, for this first reading material that we're taking on globalization, there's not so much, should I say, of a tangible connection between the material and the post on your country that you're making today, as there will be for successive readings in the book. This is a very broad salvo to open up our entry point into studying comparative media. So that means you're going to have some creative license for this first post. You're going to be able to take, again, concepts from the chapter, and you're going to be able to say, from these concepts that are talking about, for example, cultural imperialism, I'm going to look for that in research that's talking about Costa Rica, that's talking about Russia, that's talking about the Netherlands, or whatever country you're studying. You're going to start to build throughout the semester a comprehensive and in-depth understanding of your country's media system this way, that's going to set you up not only to be knowledgeable about the country that you're so interested in studying, many of you of which have heritage in those countries, I would assume, but you're also going to be prepared for your final paper. Okay, so once again, the guidelines for the country media posts are posted on D2L. They're posted under the content tab, and they are also posted under the discussions link. And so the guidelines for the posts are right here. Take me a moment to open them up to get to that web page. Once again, you have a word count. In 190 to 210 words, you must research your country's media system to describe how your country can be characterized using the concepts from the day's readings, today's readings on globalization. Sources for your information should be from verifiable, legitimate sources. Examples include news organizations, government agencies, academic articles, and polling organizations. In your posts, you should attempt to capture an element of your country as it relates to media, a distinctive element, and over the course of the semester to drill down into your chosen country in terms of learning about your media system. Each post is going to be worth 2 points, and the post will be graded, as I state right here, on your clarity of thought and the connection between the day's readings and the information you provide on the country. So once again, I'm really relying on you to flex that muscle that you have, that intellectual muscle, to demonstrate that you've understood the readings and you can apply them to your own country. All right, once again, I'll be sending a sample round that will help you understand, if you're not quite feeling comfortable with that assignment, how you can make it better. All right, so let's move on now to talk about globalization. Globalization is really a worldwide climate that's taking place. It's taking place all over the world. It's not new. It's a worldwide climate where industries, governments, organizations, cultures, and people, they're all coming together. They're all coming together, and media are facilitating that, right? In the past, could you ever imagine watching a television show from another country that just happens to appear on your television, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago? Could you imagine listening to a radio program, a radio station, and hearing songs from Justin Bieber, who's from Canada? Could you imagine this? Sure, you can imagine that, because globalization has been taking place for centuries and centuries. And what is behind the globalization is what I refer to as the promiscuity of corporate profit making. The promiscuity of corporate profit making. In the media industry, we have really huge media conglomerates described in this chapter. A conglomerate is a massive organization. It's like an umbrella, and underneath it you have all these subdivisions and media properties. A great example in our country is the Disney Corporation. The Disney Corporation, we think of as Mickey Mouse, and it's got all these theme land parks. It's sort of an icon of American culture. It's so embedded in our culture that parents incorporate Disney in their parenting. Yeah, sure, after you graduate from Sesame Street, then your next level of schooling or babysitting, if you want, like, is Disney programs. They're safe. Parents put that in front of their children to give them a value-oriented upbringing. Not all parents, of course. And then kids, wising up, they move on to MTV, or they move on to other kind of content that is more teen-oriented. But for that time, Disney is in there. However, Disney owns ABC. Disney owns ESPN. Did you know that? So Disney is an umbrella corporation with these media properties, just two of which I've mentioned here. And that's what we're talking about here. These corporations have a promiscuity. They are not content with their bottom line here within the United States. They will reach capacity. The Disney Channel will reach capacity here in the United States. There are only so many people that Disney can capture as an audience. I myself, I'm never going to watch a Disney Channel. I don't want to see anything on Disney. I'm not interested in Disney. No offense meant, but I'm not going to be. I'm part of that ceiling that Disney can't get past. So what happens next? The company looks to overseas markets. It looks to overseas markets to market its television content. And that's why Disney has theme parks in China, in France, in Hong Kong. Yeah, because along with these theme parks, you have the Disney media product of Mickey Mouse and Pluto and all the Disney movies marketed along with it. That's promiscuity. That's trying to reach foreign markets. So really the drive behind this is global profit making. It really has developed an unconsciousness worldwide. I want you to pause this video right now. And before you do, sorry, not right now. I'm going to ask you to pause the video. But before I do, I want to ask you, where do you think you are representing right now in terms of the clothes that you are wearing? Do you have any idea? Okay, so stop the video and look at the labels and see where your clothes are made. Stop and check it out. All right, hopefully you just didn't blow me off on that. You actually did check the labels. How many of you found China or Hong Kong or Taiwan or the Philippines or Mexico? These are major centers where clothing is manufactured. And so there's an unconsciousness. You wear clothing from another country and you're totally unaware of the conditions in the factory in which the person is working. Completely unaware of the struggles, the pay, the conditions that they return to in their family, because it's all about the product. It's all about what you buy. It's an unconsciousness that takes place in the globalization. Now, as I mentioned, globalization is neither new nor old. Unfortunately, what a euphemism that is. You know what a euphemism is? It's an understatement. Horrifically. Even that's not strong enough. Globalization originates with the slave trade. Well, no, it doesn't originate with the slave trade. It originates in when nation states started trading in Europe. But globalization took off with the slave trade. The triangle, as it was referred to, the trading triangle of trade, where ships would sail from Europe, Britain, Holland, Portugal. They would go to Africa. They would purchase, capture, cajole, by all means, African slaves, take them to the Caribbean, and slaves would be auctioned and would work on plantations in the Caribbean, banana plantations, coffee plantations, sugar plantations. Rum is a byproduct of molasses. That would then all be unloaded to the ships, and the ships would go back to Europe. That right there is a slave trade, and is as horrific and unseemly as it is also an example of early globalization, is it breaking countries out of their borders and into interchanges with the rest of the world. And so globalization is both old, but it's also very new. We have, if you were to take a look at The Voice for today, for example, today, The Voice, the television show, you can find that all over the world. That show has been marketed you can find that show in Britain. And I'm not talking about with Americans on it. I'm talking about with British singers on it. And that's the kind of new globalization that's taking place. I mean, the Apple phone in your pocket right now, over 90% of students have iPhones. Most of the parts for that, most of the elements for that are gathered in African countries like Tanzania. The chemicals that make up your phone, that's where they're coming from. And then those phones are assembled in China. So in your pocket right now, you've got Africa and you've got China. Now, one of the areas of research in globalization has to do with epistemology. Epistemology is the study of how knowledge is limited. And so that's what we're going to head into now, because when we study the factors that are behind globalization, we're going to start to study how our knowledge becomes limited by the media that we access. For example, if I was to say to you, I will give you an A in this class. I will give you an A in this class if you can tell me who the president of Mexico is right now. Can you do that? No. I bet nobody in the class can. How amazing is that? You know, the United States only borders two countries, Canada and Mexico, and you're telling me you don't know the president of the one of the two countries that borders us? Really? Do you think Mexicans know our president? Do you think Canadians know our president? Do you know the name of the Canadian Prime Minister? Not even a president. Yeah, Justin Trudeau for Canada. You probably knew that one. Some of you did, at least upon hearing his name. And in Mexico, it's Obrador, President Luis Obrador. Yeah, you probably didn't know that, right? So why is that? Am I saying you're stupid? No, I'm not saying you're stupid. I am saying that the media content that you access in this country on a regular basis does not provide that information. It doesn't make a joke about Justin Trudeau in sitcoms. You don't hear President Obrador's name being brought up in a family conversation on a reality TV show. Doesn't happen. That's epistemology right there. It's limiting our knowledge about the rest of the world. So now let's dig deeper into why globalization is taking place according to the profit motive. And there's some things that are going on. Number one, there's a factor of travel. It's much easier to travel today than it has ever been in the past. You can go online. You can find all kinds of great deals. Hotwire is a great way to buy a last-minute plane ticket or last-minute hotel stay. It's very easy to travel today, and plus, more airports have been opened up and more airlines, and especially low-cost airlines. So it's very easy to get places today and to go to other countries. And when you go to other countries, you start purchasing foreign products that you want to be able to purchase back here. You start watching foreign television shows. You start looking at newspapers and magazines in other countries that you'd like to get back here. Your books. You start seeing films. You start to get a taste for the rest of the world. So that's travel that's fueling